Imagine that you were being told that you need to create a code so complex and complicated that only you and your other peers that are creating the code with you can understand. Now try doing that for a country that not too long ago kicked you off the land that you had called home for thousands of years and had put you onto reservations that would also sometimes be used by the same government. And on top of that, you may only be about 17 to 18. Now this is a truly difficult task. Who were these people, you may ask, that were tasked by America to create this incredibly difficult code? They were the Navajo Code Talkers. The Navajo Code was an X factor for America in World War II. If it worked, it would be a huge advantage for America over Japan. If it didn't, well, then it was back to the drawing board. Now, the Navajo weren't the only Native Americans to have created a code for America during war. The Cherokee and Choctaw were Native American tribes who created codes for America to use during World War I. But the term code talker is more commonly associated with the Navajo code talkers. Now, let's learn more about the Navajo code talkers, shall we? In my opinion, many thousands of American soldiers would have died without the aid of the Navajo code talkers. Who are the Navajo to begin with? Well, they are a group of indigenous peoples who have been around for about 1,000 years and who mainly reside in the southwestern part of the United States. There are roughly 300,000 people enrolled currently, which obviously isn't a very impressive number. Somehow, though, they ended up in the middle of World War II helping America, a country that didn't necessarily have the utmost respect for them. So, why would the Navajo fight for America then? Now, I don't think that it's any secret that America kinda kicked the Navajo out of their homeland and put them onto reservations where the Navajo were mistreated. So, why fight for America then, after all of these misdeeds? Well, they fought alongside the American government because they believed that they were protecting their homeland. And they also believed that they were fighting a greater evil in the Axis powers. So, while they might not see eye to eye with the rest of America, they saw a difference between the Axis and Allied powers of World War II, and they chose what they felt was the right side. Now, why was this language or code so effective at being, well, unbreakable? For starters, the Navajo language wasn't written down. Even to this day, there isn't any written Navajo language, so only people who have been around the Navajo for extended periods of time or the Navajo themselves would be able to understand the Navajo language. Another reason the Navajo language is virtually impossible to crack is because multiple words can mean the exact same thing, so it was and still is incredibly hard to understand. So, what was the significance of the Navajo code talkers? Well, can you name another group of indigenous peoples who came up with an unbreakable code? Because there were a few others, like the Cherokee. But you remember the Navajo. Why? Well, it may be because they got more publicity in the form of documentaries and books. But it's also because they created one of the most complicated codes in history, mainly because it's unwritten. I mentioned this earlier. A very basic analysis of a Navajo code is a Navajo word means an animal's name, which means a word in English. An example, the Navajo word she dignaya means turtle, which in the Navajo code means tank. So, it's a very, very complex system of Navajo translations. Now, if that wasn't hard enough for you to understand, then try translating that with bullets flying overhead. And remember, some of these code talkers were as young as 15. It truly is astonishing how they were able to do what they did. Because if they didn't, I would be talking about the Cherokee and their contributions to the World War I effort. not the Navajo Code Talkers of World War II. The Code Talkers were well liked among the Marine Corps because of their tenacity and courage. Not only were they amazing with their code talking skills, but many were also excellent with hand-to-hand combat and had more endurance than the average U.S. soldier. They, on occasion, also had to be good marksmen, because what good is a soldier who can't shoot when bullets are being shot at you? The Code Talkers were mainly deployed in the Pacific and Central Europe. Unfortunately, as with most things, there is always a negative that comes with all the good. Even more unfortunate was that these negatives were at the expense of the Navajo, not the U.S. government or other parties. Some of these side effects were that the Navajo reservations were being used by the U.S. government as prisoners of war camps and other military operations because the U.S. felt that the Navajo had agreed to share their land since they were fighting in the war with the rest of America. Another negative effect of the Navajo joining World War II was that the medical care that Navajo had used to receive was now not as great as it used to be. This is because the nurses and doctors that used to be on the reservations were being sent overseas to help treat the wounded. The funds for the Navajo's medical care were also being reallocated to help America in the war. Finally, the Navajo were, and still are, a small group. They didn't grow in size due to the start of World War II. Joining a war means that some people are going to die, right? So, what happens when an already small group joins a war where people are going to die? Their numbers will get even smaller. But don't think that only negative things happened to the Navajo due to them joining World War II. Some positive things happened, including the fact that their Marine peers treated them with the utmost respect, and they were considered vital to the capture of Iwo Jima. So I hope you can take something away from this, and I hope that it's more than, oh, well, the Code Talkers were special. I want you to know how they were special, and that it wasn't easy for them in any way. They had it very tough, yet they endured, and because of that hard work and dedication, they are remembered today as heroes of World War II. Lastly, I want you to understand that the Code Talkers were incredibly tough. They fought amongst some of the best trained soldiers in the world, and yet they stood out. The Marines regarded them as necessary to the victory of Iwo Jima and found them special even among the other U.S. troops. Getting picked out of a group by the Marines is something special. That doesn't happen to every soldier. The Navajo Code Talkers were well liked by which military branch? A. Army, B. Navy, C. Air Force, D. Coast Guard, or E. Marines? The answer is E. The Marines. How many people are a part of the Navajo Nation? Is it A. 300, B. 3,000, or C. 300,000? The answer is C. 300,000. True or false? There weren't any other Native American tribes that wrote codes for America. The answer is false. There were a few others like the Cherokee.